They told her she didn't belong. They said her voice didn't matter. But when 15-year-old Amira Hasan walked onto that stage in front of 600 people, she was about to prove them all wrong in a way nobody could have ever imagined. This is the story of a girl who lost everything, found nothing but cruelty in the place that promised her safety, and discovered a gift so powerful it would silence an entire auditorium and change lives forever. But to understand what happened on that stage, you need to know where Amira's journey really began. 3 years earlier, Amira sat in the back of a crowded truck, her mother's trembling hand gripping hers as they fled the only home she'd ever known. The sounds of war become as familiar to her as breathing. Damascus, once a city of ancient beauty and bustling markets where Amira would help her father in his small music shop, had become unrecognizable. Her father, a gentle man who taught violin to neighborhood children, had been killed in a bombing 2 months before. The shop, filled with instruments and dreams, was nothing but rubble. Her mother, Layla, had made an impossible choice: stay and risk losing her only remaining child, or flee into the unknown with nothing but hope and a small backpack. They left in the middle of the night, joining thousands of others walking toward a future they couldn't see. Amira carried only 3 things: her father's photograph, a small journal where she wrote her thoughts, and something her father had given her on her 12th birthday, something she kept hidden in her pocket, like a secret piece of her old life, something that would later become the key to everything. The journey to England took 7 months. 7 months of sleeping in camps, of hunger that made her dizzy, of watching her mother's face grow more hollow with each passing week. They crossed borders in the darkness, rode in trucks with strangers, and waited in endless lines where officials looked at them with suspicion or pity, sometimes both. Amira's mother would whisper to her every night, "We survive, Habibti. We survive because that is what your father would want. We survive because you have a future waiting for you." When they finally arrived in Manchester on a gray November morning, Amira thought the hardest part was over. She had no idea that the real battle was just beginning. Thornfield Secondary School was a sprawling brick building in a working-class neighborhood where most families had lived for generations. When Amira walked through those doors for the first time, wearing donated clothes that didn't quite fit and carrying a backpack that had seen too many miles, she felt every eye in the hallway turn toward her. The whispers started immediately. "That's the refugee girl. Did you see her shoes? I heard she doesn't even speak English properly." Emma Richardson noticed her first. Emma was everything Amira wasn't. Confident, popular, blonde, with the kind of easy laugh that seemed to fill every room. She was the center of a group of girls who moved through the school like they owned it, and in many ways they did. Emma's father was a local councilman, and she'd never had a want for anything in her entire life. When she saw Amira standing awkwardly in the cafeteria that first day, something flickered across her face. Not sympathy. Something else. Something darker. "Lost, are we?" Emma said, approaching with her friends flanking her like guards. "Let me guess. You're the charity case everyone's been talking about." Amira's English was halting, learned from broken lessons in the refugee camp. "I am looking for where to sit." Emma's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, definitely not with us. We have standards." Her friends laughed, and Amira felt her cheeks burn with shame. She ate lunch alone that day, and every day after, sitting at a table in the corner while conversations and laughter swirled around her like a language she couldn't understand. But the verbal jabs were just the beginning. Within weeks, Emma's campaign against Amira became relentless. She would knock Amira's books out her hands in the hallway. She'd mock her accent in front of entire classrooms. Once, she took Amira's journal, the one place where Amira poured out her grief and loneliness, and read entries aloud to a group of students, imitating her broken English and making them laugh at her pain. "My father would be alive if the bombs had not come." Emma read in an exaggerated accent. "I miss the sound of his violin." She paused for dramatic effect. How tragic. How absolutely pathetic. Amira snatched the journal back, tears streaming down her face, and ran. She ran until she found an empty music room at the far end of the school, a place most students had forgotten existed. She collapsed against the wall, sobbing, clutching her journal to her chest. This was supposed to be safety. This was supposed to be a new start. Instead, it was a different kind of war, one where the weapons were words and the wounds were invisible. But then something caught her eye. In the corner of the dusty room sat an old upright piano, its keys yellow with age. Amira walked toward it slowly, as if approaching a ghost. She hadn't touched a musical instrument since her father died. The pain had been too great. Music had been their language, the thing that connected them beyond words. Her father would play violin while she sang, her voice pure and clear, filling their small apartment with something beautiful in a world that was falling apart. She sat down at the piano bench and placed her fingers on the keys. They were cold and slightly out of tune, but when she pressed down, the sound that emerged was like opening a door she kept locked for too long. She began to play a melody her father had taught her, a Syrian lullaby her grandmother used to sing. And then, without planning to, without even thinking about it, she began to sing. The words came out in Arabic, soft at first, then stronger. Her voice filled the empty room, carrying all the grief and loneliness and longing she'd been holding inside. She sang for her father. She sang for her destroyed home. She sang for the girl she used to be and the girl she was trying to become. She didn't know that someone was listening. Mr. Thompson, the music teacher, had been in his office next door, grading papers. When he heard that voice, he stopped mid-sentence, his pen frozen in his hand. He'd been teaching music for 32 years, and he'd heard thousands of young voices. But this was something different. This was raw talent mixed with real pain, the kind of emotion that couldn't be taught or faked. He stood up slowly and walked to the door, peering through the small window into the practice room. He watched Amira sing, watched tears stream down her face as her voice soared and dipped, watched her pour everything she had into that song. When she finished, there was silence. Then Mr. Thompson knocked gently on the door. Amira jumped, startled, quickly wiping her tears. "I'm sorry, I did not mean to. I should not be here." Mr. Thompson raised his hand, his eyes kind. "Please, don't apologize. That was extraordinary. What's your name?" "Amira Hasan." "Amira, I'm Mr. Thompson. I teach music here. How long have you been singing?" "Since I was small. My father, he taught me. But this was the first time since he..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Mr. Thompson nodded, understanding. "I'm so sorry for your loss. But Amira, you have a gift, a real gift. Have you ever thought about performing?" Amira's laugh was bitter. "Nobody here wants to hear me. They do not even want to see me. That's where you're wrong." Mr. Thompson pulled up a chair and sat down. "Every year, this school hosts a winter showcase. It's a big deal. Parents, students, local community members, they all come. Usually, we have about 600 people in the audience. I think you should perform." Amira's eyes widened with fear. No, I cannot. They will laugh at me. They already laugh at me." Mr. Thompson leaned forward. "Let me tell you something I've learned in my many years of teaching. Music has a power that goes beyond language, beyond borders, beyond the small-minded cruelty of people who don't understand. When you sing, really sing, people listen, not with their prejudices, not with their assumptions. They listen with their hearts. And your voice, Amira, your voice could touch hearts. But what would Emma Richardson say? What would everyone say when the refugee girl, the girl they mocked and ignored, stepped onto that stage? The thought terrified her. Yet something in Mr. Thompson's words planted a seed. Maybe, just maybe, this could be her chance to be seen as something other than a victim, to be heard as something other than an outsider. Over the next 3 months, Amira met with Mr. Thompson twice a week in that forgotten music room. He helped her choose a song, something that would showcase her voice and tell her story. They settled on a haunting piece, a fusion of a traditional Arabic melody with English lyrics that Mr. Thompson helped her write. It was about loss and hope, about leaving home and finding yourself, about the universal language of pain and resilience. But learning the song was the easy part. The hard part was surviving each day at school while Emma's bullying intensified. It was as if Emma could sense that Amira was building something inside herself, some kind of strength, and she needed to crush it before it could grow. One particularly brutal afternoon, in early December, Emma cornered Amira in the bathroom. "You know what I heard?" Emma said, applying lipstick in the mirror while her friends blocked the door. I heard you're planning to embarrass yourself at the winter showcase. Is that true? Amira's heart pounded. I am performing. Yes. Emma laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. Oh, this is going to be entertaining. The refugee girl, who can barely speak English, is going to get on stage in front of the entire school. Do you know what's going to happen? People are going to laugh. They're going to record it. You're going to become a joke, even more than you already are. But please, go ahead. I'll make sure I have my phone ready. Amira pushed past him and ran, Emma's laughter following her down the hallway. That night, she told her mother she wanted to withdraw from the showcase. I cannot do it, Mama. I cannot give them more reasons to hate me. Her mother, who had been working 2 cleaning jobs to keep them in their tiny apartment, sat down beside her. Amira looked at her mother's tired face, the lines that hadn't been there before the war, before the journey, before all the loss. My darling girl, Layla said softly, your father used to say that the most beautiful music comes from the deepest pain. He said that when you sing, you give people a gift. You let them feel something real. Do not let cruel people take that gift away from you. Do not let them silence you. But what if I fail? Her mother cupped her face in both hands. Then you fail with courage. You fail knowing you tried. But what if you don't fail? What if you give them something so beautiful they have no choice but to see you, really see you, for who you are? The night of the winter showcase arrived on a freezing December evening. The school auditorium was packed with 600 people, just as Mr. Thompson had said. Parents filled the seats, chatting excitedly. Students clustered in groups, some performing, others there to watch. The air buzzed with anticipation, and the smell of popcorn from the concession stand. Backstage, Amira stood frozen with terror. She wore a simple dark blue dress that her mother had altered to fit her perfectly. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. Around her, other students prepared for their performances, practicing dance moves, running through comedy sketches, tuning instruments. No one spoke to her. She was alone, as always. Emma Richardson was performing, too, a polished pop song with choreographed dance moves. She'd gone first, and the audience had loved it, cheering and whistling. As she came off stage, she walked directly past Amira and whispered, "Your turn to crash and burn." Mr. Thompson appeared at Amira's side. "You ready?" Amira's voice came out as barely a whisper. "I do not think I can do this." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Amira, do you remember what I told you? Music goes beyond everything else. Let them hear your heart. That's all you need to do." And then he added something that would stay with her forever. "Your father is watching. Make him proud." The student announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. And now, performing an original piece, please welcome Amira Hasan. The applause was polite, but scattered. Amira walked onto the stage on legs that felt like water. The lights were blinding. She couldn't see individual faces, just a sea of shadowy figures stretching back into the darkness. 600 people, 600 strangers, 600 potential judges. She reached the microphone at center stage. For a moment, there was only silence. Then she heard it, cutting through the quiet like a knife. Someone in the audience laughed. Then another person. She saw phones being raised, ready to record her humiliation. This was it. This was the moment Emma had predicted. The moment she would become a viral joke. The refugee girl who thought she could belong. Every instinct told her to run, to flee off the stage and never look back. But then she remembered her mother's words. You fail with courage. She remembered her father's face, the way his eyes would close when he played violin, lost in the music. She remembered the girl she used to be, the one who sang without fear, who filled a small Damascus apartment with joy despite the war raging outside. Amira closed her eyes, and she opened her mouth. What happened next would be remembered by everyone in that auditorium for the rest of their lives. The first note that came out of Amira's mouth was pure and clear, like crystal breaking the silence. It soared up into the rafters of the auditorium, carrying a pain and beauty so raw that the laughter stopped instantly. Every phone lowered. Every whispered conversation ceased. 600 people held their breath. She sang the first verse in Arabic, her voice weaving through the traditional melody her grandmother had taught her father, and her father had taught her. The word spoke a home that no longer existed, of olive trees and ancient streets, of a life before the bombs. Even those who didn't understand the language understood the emotion. It was universal. It was heartbreak. Then the song shifted, moving into English, into the lyrics Mr. Thompson had helped her craft. I walked through the fire, and I lost my way. I searched for tomorrow in yesterday. But somewhere in the ashes, I learned to see that home is not a place. It lives in me. In the audience, people began to react. A mother in the third row felt tears streaming down her face, thinking of her own daughter, who she'd almost lost to illness. A father in the back remembered his immigrant grandfather's stories of arriving in England with nothing. A teacher who had lost her brother in a car accident pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the rawness of grief being transformed into beauty. Emma Richardson sat in her seat, her phone forgotten in her lap, her carefully maintained expression crumbling. She had expected to laugh. She had expected to mock. Instead, she felt something crack open inside her chest, something she'd been keeping carefully locked away. Her own mother had left when Emma was 8 years old, walking out without explanation, leaving Emma with a father who buried himself in work and a loneliness she masked with cruelty. Listening to Amira sing about loss and resilience, Emma realized with stunning clarity what she'd been doing. She'd been trying to break someone else to avoid facing what was already broken inside herself. Amira's voice grew stronger, building toward the bridge. She was no longer the terrified girl who had walked onto the stage. She was every refugee who had ever fled their home. She was every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. She was her father's daughter, and she was singing with every ounce of courage she possessed. The bridge of the song was the most powerful part, switching between Arabic and English, her voice climbing higher and higher. They can take the streets where I used to play. They can burn the house where I learned to pray. But they cannot touch what lives inside. They cannot kill my father's pride. They cannot silence what remains. The music flowing through my veins. By now, the entire auditorium was transfixed. Students who had ignored Amira in the hallways found themselves unable to look away. Teachers who had watched her struggle alone in the cafeteria felt ashamed they hadn't done more. Parents who had voted against accepting refugees in their community felt their certainties shake. Mr. Thompson stood in the wings, tears streaming down his weathered face. In 32 years of teaching, he had never witnessed anything like this. This wasn't just a performance. This was transformation. As Amira moved into the final chorus, something extraordinary happened. Her mother, Layla, who had been sitting in the back row in her worn cleaning uniform, having rushed from work to make it on time, stood up. She began to sing with her daughter, her voice joining Amira's in harmony on the Arabic verses. It was something they used to do together before the war, when they had a home and a family and a future that made sense. Then another person stood up, an elderly Syrian man who owned a small restaurant in town, who had arrived in Manchester 40 years earlier and still remembered the pain of leaving everything behind. He added his voice to theirs. Then a Lebanese woman stood, then a Palestinian family. One by one, members of the immigrant community scattered throughout the audience rose to their feet, adding their voices to the song, creating a chorus of survival, of resilience, of refusing to be erased. But it wasn't just them. A British grandmother stood up, not singing but with her hand over her heart. A young student from Amira's class stood up, tears on his face, ashamed of every time he'd walked past her without speaking. A teacher stood, then another, then another. By the time Amira sang the final note, holding it impossibly long, pouring every ounce of herself into it, the entire auditorium was on its feet. 600 people standing in stunned, reverent silence as her voice faded into the air. For a moment, there was nothing, just the echo of the song and the weight of what had just happened. And then the auditorium erupted. The applause was thunderous, a wall of sound that shook the rafters. But it wasn't just applause. People were weeping openly. Strangers were embracing. Parents were holding their children tighter. Something had shifted in that room. Something fundamental about how people saw the world and each other. Amira stood at the microphone, stunned, tears streaming down her face, unable to process what was happening. She had expected humiliation. She had prepared herself for cruelty. Instead, she was being seen, really seen, for the first time since arriving in this country. Mr. Thompson walked onto the stage and hugged her, whispering, I told you they would listen." The applause continued, swelling louder. The standing ovation lasted for 5 full minutes. People didn't want it to end. They didn't want to return to the world where this feeling didn't exist. In her seat, Emma Richardson remained standing, her mascara running down her face, her carefully constructed armor completely shattered. When the applause finally began to fade and people started to leave, Emma didn't move. She watched Amira accept hug after hug from tearful audience members, watched her mother hold her like she was the most precious thing in the world, watched the community embrace this girl that Emma had tried so hard to destroy. Later that night, after the crowds had dispersed and the auditorium had emptied, Emma found herself standing outside the music room where she knew Amira would be. She could see her through the small window, sitting at the piano with Mr. Thompson, both of them looking exhausted and elated. Emma raised her hand to knock, then lowered it. What could she possibly say? How could she apologize for months of cruelty, for trying to break someone who had already survived so much? But then Amira looked up and saw her standing there. Their eyes met through glass. Emma expected anger, expected hatred, expected everything she deserved. Instead, Amira stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Emma's voice, when it finally came, was small and broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. I needed you to know that what you did tonight, what you showed us, it changed something in me. You're stronger than I could ever be." Amira looked at this girl who had made her life miserable, this girl who was now standing before her completely vulnerable, and she made a choice to respond to cruelty with something her father had taught her. "My father used to say that hurt people, but healed people heal people. I do not know your story, Emma. I do not know what pain you carry, but I know that holding on to hate only makes us smaller. I am choosing to be bigger." Emma broke down completely, sobbing like she hadn't cried since her mother left. Amira, in an act of grace that nobody could predicted, reached out and hugged her. Two girls, both carrying their own wounds, both learning that healing was possible if you had the courage to be honest. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The video of Amira's performance, recorded by dozens of audience members, went viral. Not in the way Emma had threatened, not as mockery, but as inspiration. News outlets picked up the story. The refugee girl who silenced an auditorium with her voice. The performance that made 600 people cry. Offers poured in. Local theaters wanted Amira to perform. A record producer from London reached out about developing her talent. A scholarship fund was established in her father's name to support young refugee artists. But more importantly than any of that, the hallways of Thornfield Secondary School transformed. Students who had ignored Amira now greeted her. Teachers made efforts to ensure refugee and immigrant students felt welcomed. Emma Richardson, in a genuine attempt at redemption, started a peer support program for new students, especially those from refugee backgrounds. She couldn't undo her past cruelty, but she could try to prevent others from following her path. Amira continued to meet with Mr. Thompson in the music room, developing her gift, but now she wasn't alone. Other students joined them, creating a diverse chorus that represented the many cultures within their school. Music became the bridge that Emma's cruelty had tried to burn. 6 months later, at the end of the school year, Amira performed a charity concert to raise money for refugee families. Standing on a much bigger stage, in front of thousands of people, she was no longer the terrified girl who almost ran. She was someone who had learned that her voice mattered, that her story mattered, that she belonged. Before she sang, she spoke to the audience. "When I first came to this country, I thought I had lost everything. My home, my father, my identity. I thought I would never belong anywhere again. I was bullied and made to feel invisible. But something happened that changed everything. I found my voice again, and in finding my voice, I found myself. This song is for everyone who has ever felt like they don't belong. You do. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Do not let anyone silence you. The audience erupted in applause before she even sang a note. When she did, her voice soared out over the crowd, carrying all the pain and hope and strength of her journey. In the audience sat her mother, crying tears of pride. Mr. Thompson sat beside her, knowing he had witnessed something rare in a teaching career, a genuine transformation. And Emma Richardson sat a few rows back, learning that sometimes the people we try to destroy become the people who save us. Because that's what Amira had done. She had saved herself by refusing to be silenced. And in doing so, she had saved others too. She had shown 600 people in an auditorium, and eventually millions more to the viral video, that our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths. That the things that make us different, the accents we carry, the stories we hold, the pain we've survived, these aren't weaknesses. They're the very things that make our voices powerful. Years later, when Amira would perform on stages around the world, when she would use her platform to advocate for refugee rights and the power of arts education, she would always remember that first performance, the one where she stood in front of 600 people and chose courage over fear, the one where she opened her mouth and broke down not just walls, but hearts, the one where she learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be silenced, refuse to be small, refuse to let cruelty win. And somewhere, she believed, her father was watching his daughter take all the music he taught her, all the love he had given her, and all the pain she had survived, and transform it into something beautiful, something that would echo far beyond that December night in a Manchester auditorium, something that would remind people that we all have a voice, we all have a story, and we all deserve to be heard. That is the story of Amira Hasan, the bullied refugee girl who opened her mouth and changed everything, not through violence or revenge, but through the most powerful weapon she possessed, her voice, carrying her truth, refusing to be silenced, showing us all what real strength looks like.